Hey, it's Kesha. Welcome and welcome back. We are on chapter 51 of our Aquarian Gospel reading. Let us go ahead and center down. I am so ready for this. Deep breath in and out. Another deep breath in and out. For your next deep breath in, just pick up all of the angst and busyness and confusion, drama. Let's pick it all up on the in-breath and release. On your next breath, pick up any remnants that might be left behind and out. On your next deep breath in, just feel yourself surrounded by a column of white light. Breathe in that light. Within the light are all the positive aspects that we could dream of. So breathe in peace, breathe in wisdom, joy, abundance, and strength. Feel it quickening each cell of the body. Feel yourself more present, more whole. And now just gently lift up into that column of light. Lifting up higher and higher. Into a glittering realm of oneness. Wisdom and understanding. Feel your inner eye and your hearts open. When you're ready, gently open your eyes. All right. So, chapter 51, we are still in our lessons at Heliopolis. We're now on the fourth lesson. When other certain days passed, the guide led Jesus to the Hall of Mirth, a hall most richly furnished and replete with everything a carnal heart could wish. The choicest viands, the most delicious wines were on the boards, and maids in gay attire served with grace and cheerfulness, and men and women richly clad were there, and they were wild with joy. They sipped from every cup of mirth. And Jesus watched the happy throng in silence for a time, and then a man in garb of sage came up and said, "Most happy is the man who, like the bee, can gather sweets from every flower." The wise man is the one who seeks for pleasure and can find it everywhere. At best, man's span of life on earth is short, and then he dies and goes, he knows not where. Then let us eat and drink and dance and sing and get the joys of life, for death comes on apace. It is but foolishness to spend a life for other men. Behold, all die and lie together in the grave, where none can know and none can show forth gratitude. But Jesus answered not. Upon the tinselled guests and all their rounds of mirth he gazed in silent thought. And then among the guests he saw a man whose clothes were coarse, who showed in face and hands the lines of toil and want. The giddy throng found pleasure in abusing him. They jostled him against the wall and laughed at his discomfiture. And then a poor, frail woman came, who carried in her face and form the marks of sin and shame. And without mercy she was spit upon and jeered and driven from the hall. And then a little child with timid ways and a hungry mien came in and asked for just a morsel of their food. But she was driven out uncared for and unloved. And still the merry dance went on. And when the pleasure seekers urged that Jesus join them in the mirth, he said, "How could I seek for pleasure for myself while others are in want? How can you think that while the children cry for bread, while those in haunts of sin call out for sympathy and love, that I can fill myself full with the good things of life? I tell you, nay. We are all kin, each one a part of the great human heart. I cannot see myself apart from that poor man that you so scorned and crowded to the wall, nor from the one in female garb who came up from the haunts of vice to ask for sympathy and love, who was by you so ruthlessly pushed back into her den of sin, nor from that little child that you drove from your midst to suffer in the cold, bleak winds of the night. I tell you, men, what you have done to these, my kindred, you have done to me. You have insulted me in your own home. I cannot stay. I will go forth and find that child, that woman, and that man, and give them help until my life's blood has all ebbed away. I call it pleasure when I help the helpless, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, heal the sick, and speak good words of cheer to those unloved, discouraged, and depressed. And this is what you call mirth? And this that you call mirth is but a phantom of the night, but flashes of the fire of passion, painting pictures on the walls of time. And while the Logos spoke, a white-robed priest came in and said to him, "The council waits for you." Then Jesus stood again before the bar. Again no word was said, and the Hierophant placed in his hands a scroll on which was writ, Philanthropy. And Jesus was a victor over selfish self. The sacred temple groves were rich in statues, monuments, and shrines, where Jesus loved to walk and meditate. And after he had conquered self, he talked with nature in these groves for 40 days. And then the guide took chains and bound him hand and foot and cast him into a den of hungry beasts, of unclean birds and creeping things. The den was dark as night, and the wild beasts howled, and the birds in fury screamed, and the reptiles hissed. And Jesus said, "Who was it that did bind me thus? Why did I meekly sit to be bound down with chains? I tell you, none has the power to bind a human soul. Of what are fetters made?" And in his might he rose, and what he thought were chains were only worthless cords that parted at his touch. And then he laughed and said, "The chains that bind men to the carcasses of earth are forged in fancy shop, are made of air and welded in illusions' fires. If man will stand erect and use the power of will, his chains will fall like worthless rags, for will and faith are stronger than the stoutest chains that men have ever made." And Jesus stood erect among the hungry beasts and birds and said, "What is this darkness that envelops me? 'Tis but the absence of light. And what is light? 'Tis but the breath of God vibrating in the rapid rhythm of thought." And then he said, "Let there be light." And with a mighty will he stirred the ethers up, and their vibrations reached the plane of light, and there was light. The darkness of that den of night became the brightness of the newborn day. And then he looked to see the beasts and the birds and creeping things, and lo, they were not. And Jesus said, "Of what are souls afraid? Fear is the chariot in which man rides to death. And when he finds himself within the chamber of the dead, he learns that he has been deceived. His chariot was a myth, and death a fancy child. But some day, all man's lessons will be learned, and from the den of unclean beasts and birds and creeping things he will arise to walk in light." And Jesus saw a ladder made of gold, and on which he climbed out the top of the white-robed priest waited him. Again, he stood before the council bar. Again, no word was said. Again, the Hierophant reached forth his hand to bless. He placed in Jesus' hand another scroll, and on this one was written, Heroism. The Logos had encountered fear in all its phantom hosts, and in the conflict he achieved the victory. So, we've all created our own halls of mirth, haven't we? Things that we thought were going to be so much fun, and we kind of get lost in ourselves and get lost in it. Whether it's food or sex or social media, whatever it might be, right? We'll focus all of our attention on that and leave the other cares for someone else. We will treat those who are not part of our mirthful dance with insults and lack of attention, if nothing else. And so the lesson there is philanthropy. To see someone else in need where you have the ability to help fulfill that need, to share of what you have, is philanthropy. It doesn't have to be this grand gesture of millions and millions of dollars. It just has to be, sometimes it's attention, right? A smile is philanthropy, right? A kind word is philanthropy. Which is not to say that every beggar on the street you have to give your money to. And that if you are in, deep thought or enmeshed in your own, mental processors or what have you, that you must smile at everyone you see. But in those moments where you are free to give and don't, that represents a certain level of stinginess that is the opposite of philanthropy. And so if we recognize, or when we recognize that we are each connected, there is the law of one. When one is harmed, all are harmed. It behooves us to give of ourselves and of our possessions, whether that's attention or what have you, or money or what have you, whatever it might be. When we have it to give, to share, right? And then trust that if we were to each do that, then none of us lacks, right? And so if I am prospered by your smile and your good word, or, a lavish gift of money, then as I pass that on to others, and others are helped and lifted up as well. And then none of us are left desolate on the street and then lost. So that's the lesson of philanthropy. And I love that he says, and what you call mirth is but a phantom of the night. It's fleeting, right? I'm sure that there was a time, well, I know there was a time where I used to go out 7-8 days a week. And I can remember that point of time, but I can't tell you about the night or, all of them, because it was a long time that I did that. It was just, it's a phantom thought. It's like something, I used to do that. There's nothing meaningful in that. But where I took the time to hear or see that someone was in pain, and they later came back to me and said, hey, you talking to me made the difference. Those situations, those instances, I do remember, because they have the weight of the heart wrapped up in them. So again, where you can, where you feel free to give, do. And see what difference that makes to you and to others. Philanthropy over selfishness. The fifth test that we came to, I like this one. This is one of my favorites. Jesus is in this garden, this grove. He's meditating, he's thinking, and then suddenly he's bound in chains. We know not from where, right? It just happened. And he agrees with that, to the extent that he is bound in chains and thrown into this dungeon with these beasts and creeping things and the birds and all of that. And then looks up and is like, wait a minute, how did I let this happen? How did I find myself here? And he summons himself and his power and calls on the light. Let there be light is one of the strongest affirmations we can possibly make, right? Think about where we hear that from. Let there be light, and God begins to create the universe. Let there be light is a principal affirmation of creation. When we don't understand something, let there be light, right? Light is wisdom. Where there is illness or the perception of illness in the body, let there be light, because that darkness, that heaviness, before the light can't stand. And so if we focus on the area of pain in the body and we ask that light be given to it, then the light illuminates that darkness. It either gives us the insight as to what is causing that medical issue or that pain, or it simply removes it. because it's at such a vibration that nothing before it can stand, and so it breaks up that congestion and it dissipates. And it's funny because I've read this, and this is the version of the book that I read when I was in seminary. And obviously, years ago when I read this, I didn't quite understand, because where it says, so Jesus stands erect among the hungry beasts and birds and said, "What is this darkness that envelops me? 'Tis but the absence of light. And what is light? 'Tis but the breath of God vibrating in the rhythm of rapid thought." The first time I read that, I made a note, "Please explain." But now it's been a few years, and I have grown in consciousness and awareness, and experiences that give me that insight. And what I just described to you, light is vibrating at such a high vibration that nothing that vibrates less than that can stand within its presence. That vibration breaks it up. And so yeah, it is but the breath of God vibrating in the rhythm of rapid thought. And when we say, "Let there be light," we are using, we are giving voice to those words of God, and we're tapping into that vibration and setting that up to flow through our world, or to express, right, through our world. We can do that in our minds, right? I have spent the good part of the day, if not the weekend, in this crazy ass malaise. Nothing wrong necessarily, but just sitting down for this reading and calling in the light made me lighter. And the physical pain I was feeling before we started, I now notice is gone. That is the power of recognition of this, of our spirit, of the spirit of light, of vibration. Why I could not have done that sooner, I do not know, but it's another little lesson. I'll take it. And when we overcome that sense of being bound, because we let ourselves get carried away, right? We let ourselves get wrapped up in things. And notice how I said that. We let ourselves get wrapped up. That's being bound. We let ourselves get carried away. And we wonder, how do we get here? And we trace ourselves back. But we can immediately overcome those situations by remembering our true nature and standing up in it. Because that's exactly what he did. If man will stand erect and use the power of will, his chains will fall like worthless rags, for will and faith are stronger than the stoutest chains that men have ever made. It just takes remembering and coming back to that. Whew. So that's something to take out into this next week. I'm just going to take it into my evening. For me, that right now is enough. I will see you all back here next Sunday. I love you in the meantime. Bye.